Today we're talking about reflected light in our painting, and what does that mean and what does it look like to have it in your painting, or how to achieve it. And first of all, reflected light is obviously in the shadows, where light will come. In this case, the light is coming from this direction, and it hits like here or in front there, and it bounces back into the shadow and it warms up the shadow. And usually you see it real strong on light objects like the real light rock here, or a white house that's in shadow, white boat, someone's white shirt, white horse, anything where there's light bouncing around. But there's also reflected light in darker objects too. Not as much in objects that have a more rougher texture like shadows in the green trees here. You're not going to see much reflected light, but I do want to add some so that the light hitting here will affect this a little bit. I might come back and scrub a little bit of orange into the blue-green of the shadow. Blue-green because it's cool, it's in the shadow, and then the orange because the effect of light bouncing into it. It just doesn't show up as much as it does in the rocks. And you can see it here also. You see it a lot more subtle in subtle ways in the photograph. The photograph doesn't show it real well. But the light is a bit warmer here in the shadow than it is in these shadows that are facing up. The flat areas, like this one's a good example. When it faces up, it's reflecting the light from the sky. And that's why it turns blue. And you can see the areas that are facing this way are catching the light bouncing back in there from the trees and rocks here on the right side. So there's always light bouncing around. Light or color. You can think of it in terms of color. But in wide objects, you're going to see a lot of the warmth from the sunlight, whatever it's hitting, bouncing in there. But also just colors next to an object. If you have a green car next to a white car, you're going to see green in the shadow as it bounces or reflects in there. So looking at, well, this is another Grand Canyon. Both these are Grand Canyon. And you can see the bluer shadow here. It's a little darker. Slightly warmer here because, again, the light's bouncing in there from the light area, and it's warming that up. You can really see it in here and in here, even though these rocks in this kind of middle area of this big rock formation is a warmer color, but making it warmer yet because of the light. Again, it comes in, hits here, and bounces back into the shadow. Again, you can see it here and here. If you're looking for it, it's a lot easier to see. If you're not looking for it, if you're not thinking about it, you won't paint it. So be really aware of reflected light. Now you also have local color, and then you have shadow color. So when I block in these shadows here, or these shadows here, I'm going to keep them cooler, a blue-violet, red-violet, a violet. And then I'm going to add the local color, in this case kind of a reddish-orange into the blue-violet. Here, the local color is going to be more the light bouncing back into it, the reflected light, that orange into the blue-violet. The rock's more of just a pale yellow-orange, but still, we want to think in terms of what's in the shadow. Is it just local color? In other words, a red apple is going to be a dark red-violet in a shadow. The local color is red, red-violet in the shadow. But if I put it next to if I put it on a very light area, the light's going to hit the base the apple's sitting on and bounce back in the shadow, and it's going to warm it up. So I'll add maybe some reddish orange to that red violet. So local color, what color is the object? And that's in the shadow, but also reflected color is in the shadow. Looking at some other subject matter, this is a good example of, on this white boat, here you have shadow and here you have shadow. Both of them are shadow. The flat one is facing the sky, so it's reflecting more blue. This one is, of course, facing to the left, and it's a lot warmer because the sunlight is hitting here and then bouncing in there. So that's why that is a lot warmer. So you can see it's a little bit of red-orange here on that area, and there's more blue-violet here. It's a subtle change, but there's a difference between here and here. And this one's just slightly warmer. You can also see the lot lighter, cooler ledge there against a slightly warmer shadow there. Now, the whole shadow is cool compared to the sunlight. The whole shadow, I would block in this whole shadow pattern, I would block in real light blue-violet. But then I would add more blue here and kind of a red-orange there. What I don't want to do when I add reflected light into an object in the shadow, I don't want to use cad yellow light. It's just too strong. That doesn't mean you can't. If you're using a limited palette of cad yellow lights, alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue, you're going to have to use yellow. But it would be yellow and alizarin. It would be more of a red-orange as opposed to a yellow. Because orange is a lot warmer than blue, obviously. But red's a lot warmer than blue, too. Sometimes I can get away with just adding a bit of cad red light, or even cad red deep or alizarin crimson. And that kind of reddish violet is warmer than the muted blue or blue violet. Not a lot. It's the red, orange to yellow orange that makes the shadows read as really reflective light. But be careful with the yellow. It can get too strong. I would also, even though the photographs don't show it, this shadow in here, after blocking it in, again with just a blue violet, color from the color wheel, make it simple, get it the right value. Then I'm going to throw in some of the color from here, because it's going to bounce in there also. We don't notice it as much in the photograph. But I want to do it. Two reasons. The color bounces into a shadow on a light area like that. But also it ties the painting together a little bit more. It creates a bit more color harmony because I'm adding a little bit of the blue-green, in this case maybe viridian with a little ultramarine, making it the same value as this, wiping off almost all of it and just scrubbing in a little bit. It's a subtle change, but if you have it there, it makes your painting look a lot more refined than just the simplified shape of the cool shadow. It needs some reflected light in it. And same thing here, the sunlight is hitting here and bouncing into here. You can see how much warmer this is. A lot of yellow orange or red orange. In other words, I could use alizarin crimson and orange or yellow ochre and orange. You know, stay away from cad yellow light. Doesn't mean you can't use it, but really strong. Here you can see a difference. This is facing up just slightly. This is facing out. So there's a little bit of a color change. This has maybe a bit more green in it from maybe the water. This has more blue from the sky. So again, all of these shadows I would block in, with a simple blue-violet, get it the value I see, maybe 2 or 3 different values, and then start the reflected light. You can see the light bouncing into there. I would add some red-orange. Plus, I would add, again, a little bit of a ultramarine blue and cerulean, or ultramarine blue and viridian. Just some kind of a bluish green in there. But really look for these changes. This one has quite a few. At first glance, you don't notice it. But study a subject for a while before you start mixing colors and values, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different values in that, or different colors and or values in that white boat in the shadow area. Another one here, you can see this area of this, on this blue boat, a little bit lighter, and I would make it a little warmer than over here. You don't necessarily see it as warmer, you see it as lighter, but I want to show that reflected light bouncing in there. Again, these shadows, even after you add the reflected light, they're still going to be cool compared to the light area. So don't get them too warm, but they have to be warmer than maybe some other shadow areas that aren't getting the reflected light. Same thing in here. This area is affected by the boat. I don't know what color is inside there. It looks like maybe some red-violet. But it's darker, a little bit more violet to red-violet. And this is lighter and a bit more of a orange, red-orange, orange color. Again, because the light hitting the sand and bouncing up in there. Same thing here. There's more light reflecting in here than there is over here. And I'm not sure why. We can't see behind the hole here. I think that's a hole. I don't know anything about boats, except they're real nice to paint. And again, just throwing different colors around. I don't see a lot of color down in here to throw in the shadows. This is an interesting one here. Let's start with the figure first. I would start with more of a reddish violet, a little cooler for his face to put it in the shadow. But then I would warm up the planes in his face, like right on the side of his face here, side of his neck. That's catching the sunlight from the shoulder. And it's a small, subtle thing. But Again, after I get the big shape filled in the right value, then come back and add the reflected light. Don't start with reflected light. Always start with the big overall value of the big area, value and temperature. Also on his shirt, you can really see, this gives the shirt a lot more form. I would start with this value for the whole shadow of the shirt. Then add the little darker here and some dark accents. Then I'm ready for reflected light. And you can see it, the folds of these shirts that are facing down where the sunlight's hitting at the bottom of the boat, they're a lot warmer. And the parts or planes of his shirt that are facing the sky are cooler. So they're going to have maybe a little more exaggerated blue-violet, more exaggerated orange to red-orange here because of his arm mostly, and some red-orange in there. So there's a strong variation of warm and cool shadow in there. It's all cool because we started with one overall cool violet, and then we're adding the reflected light. Now the violet is fairly muted because the shirt isn't really white. It's kind of an off-white, maybe a cream color. So the violet in here, the shadow color for that shirt, is going to be a slightly muted because of the yellow accent in that t-shirt. And you mix that kind of yellow tint to the shirt with the bluish, blue-violet shadows, and that's going to mute it slightly. Here, you don't see much of the reflected light. You see reflected light from the water as that broken reflection. It's reflecting into the boat, but it's not a real temperature change. I would probably make it more of a temperature change. I would eliminate all that little detail of the sparkling water reflecting into the boat and just make it slightly warmer. Warmer in here and have it gradually getting even cooler as it goes that way. Because again, that temperature change for reflected light really helps the color. You can see here also how warm these shadows are. Of course, the boat is more of a yellow ochre color, so that doesn't really count. But look for temperature change from reflected light in the shadows. It really makes a difference. Now, I have a few paintings here. This is by Emile Groupé. It's not a great reproduction now that I look at this one, but as the white tree, sunlight coming this way, and the light down here is bouncing up into the shadows. You can see warmer here, a little cooler on the areas that are facing up, but a lot of warmth, especially in here, that's catching from the ground. A lot of warmth right in there. That bit of orange really warms up the shadows and gives the feel of the light bouncing into the shadows. Gives a lot more life to shadows. Shadows can look dead if they're just one value in color. So get some subtle value and color change after you get that one overall value. You have to have something to paint into. Like in this tree again, Emile Groupé probably started with a value like that, filled it all in, then went for some darker, warmer changes in there. This limb is leaning out, so it's facing the sunlight, it's facing straight down, so the sunlight orange is bouncing up into there and really warming that up. Here it's a little cooler up here, some warm again, so variation of warm and cool, and some value changes. Be careful with the value changes because they're detail. All these little darks and lights, if he kept on adding those, it would really get broken up and kind of lose that fresh feel of light and simple value, the more little darks and lights you have in there. So I would rather eliminate most of the detail and focus more on the reflected light and how that affects the shadows rather than detail. It needs some detail, maybe some dark accents to give the shadow a little bit more depth, but most of it's color change. Here you can see the violet shadow on the yellow house. Now some of this is local color. The yellow house in shadow is going to be more towards a violet and orange color. But you can see the reflected light in here, sunlight hitting the bottom of the porch and bouncing up. These overhangs or these porches always get a lot of reflected light near the top. And that's what he's doing here, really warming that up. A lot of reflected light and no shadows from light, again, just bouncing back in there. So look for ways to show that variation. This is another Emile Coupe. You can see here these are white sails, but not very white. A lot of the light is from the sunlight shining through the sail. But a lot of it too is just bounced this orange here, kind of a yellow-green. A lot of color variation. But then the folds, you can see one here and those there, they're facing the sky a bit more. So they're a lot bluer. And he has a nice kind of a muted blue-violet up here and gradually getting warmer down here because that's where the sunlight is reflecting from the boat. Not so much on the top. And you can see some of the blue from the water in here, a little stronger green, more of a yellow green, maybe from the light hitting the water and bouncing in there. So always look for color, more temperature, color temperature change, and along with some value change in those shadows. It really makes your painting come to life a lot more.